If you were to ask me what my favorite camera of 2021 is, I would have to say it was the Sony ZV-1 by far. For the price, the size, the image quality, you really can't go wrong with this camera that, in my opinion, is almost everything the GoPro should have, other than it being a little bit bigger and not waterproof. But we're going to get into that today. I'm going to do a review here on the Sony ZV-1, talk to you about why I like it, but we're also going to do it a little bit vlog style. So I'm going to take this camera out with me on a little bike ride to Fort Lauderdale Beach. Without further ado, let's hit it. On the way to the beach, there's some cool little properties, and I love this little bike ride because you get to see a lot more than you did when you did coming from Boca Raton, north South Florida. But I love this place. So we're here at now Fort Lauderdale Beach. Got the nice little Christmas tree behind me, doing the last few days of Christmas celebration until it actually is Christmas, although it is Christmas like tomorrow. So now that we're here at the beach, let's talk about why I love the Sony ZV-1 so much. So number one, which I already covered, is portability. This thing fits in my pocket, and basically what I wanted a GoPro to be. You know, something with a nice depth of field. I don't have to change lenses, it's got the lenses built in, and I can just go with it. Do I use this for professional shoots? Not really. I do bring it with me on shoots, but I really just use it to do a lot of behind the scenes stuff, which this camera is great for. I bring it for a lot of BTS content, which you guys are gonna start seeing a lot come out here on the channel, especially when I'm talking about specific products that I use on shoots. And being able to bring this with me, I don't have to use a big clunky cinema camera, and it's kind of the good, even medium. But after shooting with hybrid cameras for the past few years, in addition to having cinema cameras, I always really just reach for the cinema cameras when it comes to like my professional work. And I never really reach for the mirrorless cameras other than a secondary angle. So what's the beauty about this is it gives me all of the fun functionality I wanted out of those hybrid cameras, and I keep it in my pocket. It doesn't take a lot of room in the bag, and I still get pretty decent image quality for the type of content I'm looking to put out coming from this camera. So the camera's lens is a 9.4 to 25.7 millimeter lens, and equivalent it's like a 24 to 70-ish. When you shoot in 4K like we are shooting in now, there is a little bit of a crop on the sensor, and there's even more of a crop if you're using stabilization, which I am using because I'm using this thing handheld. So this is what it looks like with the stabilization on in 4K. This is what it looks like in 4K at the same angle with just the lens stabilization on. So you see it's a little shakier, but it does give you a wider field of view, and I pretty much only shoot in 4K on this camera because although 1080p you will get the whole sensor, the bitrate is just so much lower. I find the image quality just isn't as good in 4K. So here's gonna be the 4K, and I'll give you 1080p right now. All right, so here is XAVC HD in 1080p. As you see, it's even a little bit wider. However, it just doesn't retain the same kind of detail I want. 50 megabits at 1080 just is a little low for me. So that's why I still keep this camera in 4K mode. So some other cool little features. So there's this mode called clear and defocus mode. And when you click the button, it basically opens the aperture as wide as possible with still keeping some autofocus settings so you can have the crispiest background possible. So as you see, it's not really on right now, we're at F9, but I'm gonna pop it on right here and we're now in defocus. And you can see instantly the background is definitely a lot more out of focus than it was before. The next thing is also the built-in ND filter. Now, although that doesn't do a lot, it still does help having the built-in ND filter. So I believe we're not using the ND filter now. I'm gonna go put it on right now. All right, so now we're shooting in the defocus mode with the ND filter on, and what you should notice is I'm not shooting at as high of a shutter speed. Now, it's not a variable ND filter, it's just, I'm guessing a one-stop ND filter. I'm gonna have to look at that, and I'll put the corrections over here when I figure out exactly how many stops it is, but it's not gonna do miracles, but it is nice to have one. Then moving to the lens itself, if you shoot at its widest like we are now, it actually is 1.8 at its widest. Now when you zoom in, I believe it goes to about 2.8, but still being able to shoot wide open 1.8 at this lens during the day on a little camera like this is amazing. So just to touch on a few things I didn't get to touch on while I was at the beach, this is a 1-inch sensor camera, which is part of the reason why when you're shooting at f1.8, you can get a somewhat shallow depth of field. Now, when it comes to focus pulling, you can't really pull focus on this camera, but there is tap to focus, which works really well. You just tap on the screen and it will focus where you want to, but you won't really be doing any kind of focus pulls with this camera. I have used the 3.5mm jack occasionally. The preamps are okay in this camera. However, to keep it nice and compact for the most part, I use it with the internal microphone. I'm actually covering it right here with this Dead Cat. As you see, it's got a pretty big microphone here at the top, and the Dead Cat does a pretty good job at covering the wind noise. As you could tell, it was pretty windy at the beach, and at least I was somewhat audible, although I'm sure you did hear some of the wind noise even with the Dead Cat. But the Sony ZV-1 is by far my favorite camera because it's the camera that I can take with me anywhere, kind of like the GoPro was for many years. The reason I would choose this over the GoPro is really just because of the versatility. I can do almost anything I could do on the GoPro and more with this camera, except for anything that revolves around weather sealing or being waterproof. As far as taking this thing on the water, I wouldn't trust it. This thing is definitely anti-waterproof. The build quality is not as good as the RX series cameras, but again, it's a lot cheaper than the RX series cameras in image quality and optics, all that stuff. It's offering the same. So I think that's kind of where you're gonna see the difference on the ZV-1 versus any of the RX cameras. The build quality is definitely a lot more plasticky, but at the same time, for what it offers, for the price, I really enjoy this camera. And if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the comments below. And if you got knowledge out of today's video, please make sure to smash that like, subscribe, and notification bell to keep up to date with the latest videos on the channel. My name's Geoff Fagien. Thank you for watching, everybody, and I will see you in the next video.